Today, we're going to talk about how to sort of build an expert business. And when I say build an expert business, I'm really just going to give you some strategy around how you can be viewed as the authority in your space and give you strategy around some of the things that all add up to you becoming the authority. One thing I will tell you, and this is just more so you guys know, you'll see an email on this, so you don't have to express any interest now or say if it's something you're interested in. But tomorrow, I'm going to actually do send an email out about this. And I made this decision yesterday. I kind of confirmed it today. So I think that this is pretty exciting for me. For those of you that haven't done a TEDx and want to do a TEDx, if you're a part of our experts bureau, we have a past training there you can follow, and it shows you the system that I use to land mine. We also share which TEDx's are looking, and we've had about half of our members so far land their TEDx just by being in the bureau. But I've had a lot of people, even members of our bureau, say, well, I want a little bit more hands-on. And so what I decided I'm going to do, which I've done this once before ever, and it was years ago. But anyway, this is just a kind of an FYI for later. I'm going to actually, I think I'm going to do tomorrow. I'm going to put it out and see who's interested in me doing a four-part how to land your TEDx talk type training, where it'll be me taking people through each time the like everything from start to finish, the exact process, how to reach organizers, how to apply to them, what to say, and I'll actually even do it in real time. And if we'll finish with a challenge where people can apply on their own. Anyway, I'm thinking of doing this. And again, if I do, which I'm planning to do it, the price is going to be 997 US. So basically, imagine being able to land your TEDx talk for $1,000. That's kind of the idea behind it, and take you through every single aspect of it. So I just want to let you know, you'll see an email probably tomorrow on my email list come out about this. But I decided that's something I want to do. I try to do something special at the end of every year. And that was what I came across this year because I've had so many people asking about landing a TEDx. And our normal pricing, because we do have a TEDx program, is prohibitive for some. It's 5,000 for the program, separate from the bureau because that it's a little more hands-on. So it's kind of this would be something in between the two. So put that's all to the side now. That allowed me to give time for a few more people to get in. Now we're ready to just rock it. So again, we're going to talk about authority positioning today, how to build your authority, how to be viewed as the expert so that, and this is a key part, when people go to you or when people look to you, they're going to see you as the actual go-to person. Because when that happens, when people see you as the go-to authority, what's really cool is that you then become the person that if they're looking at two people, they decide, I'm going to go with Art. I see Art on my screen. If Art's the expert in the sales side and they're looking at Art and somebody else and they go to Art's website and they say, oh, he's been on ABC. Oh, he's done a TEDx talk. Oh, he's been on a Blue Talk stage. Oh, he's spoken at UCLA or Oxford. And they see those things and they go to the next person, and Art and the other person is the one they're looking at as who they might work with. And they see all that in Art's and the other person has none of that. Without me going into much detail, I think most of you know odds are fairly good. The person will go with the person that looks like the authority to them. If Art has a book on it, somebody else doesn't, full stop, they're probably going to go with Art. And I'm saying if all things are equal. It's different if they know the person and all that stuff. But if all things are equal and Art has a book and the other person doesn't, Art's going to get more points. If Art has a best-selling book and the other person has a book but not a best-selling book, Art gets more points. If Art's book is on the Amazon, or let's say Barnes & Noble list, and the other person's on Amazon, Art probably gets more points because Barnes and Noble is not as common. Amazon, everybody, that's the one they hang their hat on. If Art is on the Wall Street Journal USA Today and the other person's on Barnes and Noble or Amazon, Art gets more points. And finally, the big all end all, if Art is on the New York Times bestseller list, he's going to get more points than the person that's on the Wall Street Journal USA Today and everybody down below. Does that make sense to everybody? Whether it's right or wrong, whether you agree with it, just does that make sense that it's a hierarchy that when people see that, they go, oh, well, how did he get on the New York Times list? And why? It's because it's the hardest one to get on. And it goes down from there. Same with the TEDx stage. When you're on a TEDx stage, people are like, oh, they were vetted. They're a TEDx speaker. It adds that extra thing. So what I want to do is I want to go through some ways you can build that today. And then also, if I can, answer some questions about that. And yeah, to your point, Art, it's all about perceptions. And as they say, perception is reality. So and when people say, how did over the years I build my career and my business? It is that perception. And I feel I put in the hours. I feel I put in the time. I feel I did it with integrity. I feel I did it the right way. I feel I put in the 10,000 hours and all the stuff. But at the end of the day, if I had none of those things on the website and somebody else had all of them, and they started a month ago and paid for them all, they would still perception wise look like they've done more than me, whether it's right or wrong. So most of the stuff I've done, like 80 to 90%, it wasn't pay to play. I did it in the trenches in real time. But what I'm saying is somebody could jump ahead of me if they had that stuff and I didn't. So I want to tell you guys some of the ways you can get those things today, and we'll dive more into the authority business as well. But before I go too far into that, the two things I want to make sure that you know is for you to build an expert business, and we can talk about this in a Q&A, but you have to have an offer. So you have to have some product that they can buy. Well, that's you as a coach, a speaker, a book, whatever it is. You have to have something to offer them, first of all. And the second piece is you have to have a funnel or a way to bring them to you. So what we're going to talk about today is if you bring them to you, how you can be the authority in their minds. Does that make sense? So if you bring 1,000 people to you, how they can look at you as the authority over somebody else. There's a whole other training, which I think we're doing one, maybe it's the fourth or fifth one, but there's a whole other training around how do you get them to come to you? How do you draw the leads to you? That's a whole other piece. One of those ways is to build an email list. And we talked about that yesterday on an inner training we did is about how to build an email list and different ways you can do that. But the email list is what brings them to you to buy from you. But if that email list brings them to you, and I see Tony on the screen, and if Tony spoke at our Blue Talks event and did a freestyle rap, and if they come and see Tony on the freestyle rap, or they go to his site and see his TEDx talk, that's the authority that gets built when they get there. But Tony's still got to get them to the site, or somebody has to help them get to the site. It could be media that drives them to the site. But I just want to preface that this isn't necessarily how do you get the leads, it's how do you build the positioning once they get to you. So the first piece I wanted to mention is just from a general point of view, authority positioning. Let me just show you guys in real time. I'm going to show you something, two-part thing, but I'll show you my website. And it's not to say I'm doing it right, but I built a website where the entire goal was just positioning. Like it wasn't to sell you anything on the website. There's nothing you can buy on the website. It was literally meant to be a website that could get me booked on podcasts and stages, and it worked. And so here's my website. Can you guys see this on the screen? Okay, I see faces saying thumbs up. So if you look at the website, and it's very basic. I mean, it looks like it's not very basic. It's got all these neat videos that play, but like it's all intentional. Everything you see is intentional. You'll see there's a TEDx, a video of me with Bob Proctor, the late Bob Proctor, me speaking at Columbia University, me with Gary Vaynerchuk, me with Tommy Chong, and I can't see the other one. Oh, me speaking at Learn, which is a big conference center. Then the next thing you'll see, as seen on. Now, prove me wrong. Go to most of the big influencers you know and tell me what you see on the front page of their website. And I promise you, almost everyone, I can't obviously say without exception, almost everyone's going to have an as seen on banner or as seen on and have logos. My point of that is, do you think if Tony Robbins, Jay Shetty, and all these big names all have that stuff on their website with all the money they've spent to become who they are, do you think they don't know that it builds credibility? I think we all know they put enough time in to know it works. And Tony Robbins, Lisa Nichols, Jay Shetty, Jack Canfield, they wouldn't give up that much real estate on the front page of their website if the as seen on wasn't as powerful as it is. So the first piece from this you need to know is you need to have an as seen on banner and or as seen on your website. And in a perfect world, have a banner on like LinkedIn, your profile when I get there, have a LinkedIn banner that says where you've been featured. Obviously, the bigger the names, the better, but they've shown, there was a study done, I think it was Kellogg University, did a study that showed that an as seen on will increase your credibility by up to 70%. Just this one thing here alone. And again, well, and I'll tell you this, I don't want to go too much into the weeds on this, but the cool part is, even if you haven't been on any big shows yet, if you can start today and have an as seen on banner in 10 days with logos on it, without any money spent and without a lot of effort. How would you do that? Well, there's services like radioguestlist.com is one of them. But if you go to a website like radioguestlist.com, sign up for their newsletter, every day they'll send you a list of podcasts that are looking for guests. Free list. Some of them charge, some don't. So go to the ones that don't charge. Let's say that you apply to 5 a day. I think conservatively, if they're looking for guests, you'll probably get on one of those 5. I think that's a fair assessment. So let's say you book one of the 5 every day and you do that for 10 days. What does that mean? That means in 10 days, you get 10 interviews on podcasts. And then when you do those interviews, ask each one of them, hey, can I use your logo on my website? They're all going to say yes because they're smaller podcasts. But here's what happens. Then you have an as seen on with 10 logos. Here's the great news. Most people don't know how big those podcasts are. So guess what that means? They don't know if it's a big show or not. All they know is you have 10 logos on your website and say you were featured on. So get those 10 on there if you don't have any other ones. And then as you get bigger names, just switch the smaller names out for the bigger ones. So that's how you can get an As Seen On banner in a few weeks for free. So there's no excuse not to have one. But you'll see here mine has As Seen On and it's bigger names, Success Magazine, Entrepreneur, Walmart, stuff like that. The next piece on my website is a media highlight reel. So if you click on here, it'll show me in different studios like NBC, ABC, what have you. You'll see magazine covers. You'll see the as featured on Times Square billboard. So before we get any further, would you guys agree, whether it's right or wrong, that this builds credibility? If you go through that and say, oh, this person's been on all these magazines, they've been on the billboard, they've interviewed so and so, they've been on all these like success and all that. And then you get down here, it's feature videos, again, all intentional. Like there's a video interview with Deepak, interview with the guy from Bar Rescue, multiple TEDx's. This is a clip, I can't remember what that one is. Larry Wingett, who did his last interview with us. And so there's those intentional videos. Then you get down here, talks about books. It's intentional. We put in the one that's a Wall Street Journal USA Today bestseller because those names have cachet, the Wall Street USA Today. Fascinating, by the way, on this other book on the left-hand side where it says forward by James Redfield, New York Times bestselling author, Celestine Prophecy. You would not believe how many people think that I'm a New York Times bestselling author because of the cover of that book. I don't say I am. I'm not. But yet they see James's thing and they just read it as that's, for some reason, that's me. Because people are like, oh, I saw on the top of your book, you're now a New York Times bestselling author. No, not really. It's just fascinating how sometimes that works. But again, those are there intentionally because if somebody's thinking to hire me for a talk or a podcast or what have you, I want them to know those things. Then testimonials, and it's from hopefully mostly big names, media, just to demonstrate the media stuff. And what I did different, instead of just putting photos of me with thought leaders, I actually used their quotes that they had given me during interviews. That way, to me, it made more sense why I was putting them on there rather than just vanity, putting them on there with me. Every one of them, there's one of their quotes here. So that's my website. And I just wanted to show you that because I hope you see the authority positioning of it, like why everything's there that it is. And what I can tell you is that website gets me paid bookings. It gets me on shows. Like people have literally told me, I didn't know who you were until I got to your website. And by the time I was done, I knew you were the guy. Whether that's right or wrong. A side note before I dive into some other areas, but even a book, writing a book, you become the authority. And I just realized this today. This book here, we'll talk about books in a bit, but I've gifted this book to a lot of people. So I'll be at an event. So I went to Lisa Nichols' event, for example, and I gifted this book to a lot of people that I met there. And they left with the book. And interestingly, I had 4 of them I know now, maybe 5, that took the book and sent me a message saying they enjoyed the book and what have you. And then later signed up for one of our packages and then brought up the book again and said, I knew when I read your book that I wanted to work with you. So, people are always saying, how can I make $2 off the selling of my book? What I'm saying is this book, I can already demonstrate has made thousands and thousands of dollars by me giving it away for free. More than I would make on the front end selling it. So, and I'm with a traditional publisher for that book. So just to put it in perspective, just for fun's sake, for me to make what I end up having clients come on that actually got the book for free in book sales, here's how many books I would have to sell. Is that right? Yeah, I'd have to sell 30,000 copies of the book to make the same amount of money I made from one day of passing out books for free. So again, we can talk about that, but the book is on the back end for most people, unless you're doing a book like The Alchemist, 320,000 or sorry, I'll correct that. 320 million copies reportedly sold. He's probably made a few dollars on the book, but for the average person, you're not going to make that kind of money. So going back to authority positioning, a book will help you become an authority. I always joke and say that's why in the word authority, the word author is the first part of it. The second piece is that those things I showed you on the website, collecting those things, securing those things, building those things will give you authority as well. So to move on from that, the As Seen On banner I mentioned, that's one of the pieces you can start doing right away, and I highly recommend it. Just having an As Seen On banner on your website, on your social media platforms, on your email signature, that alone is going to increase your credibility. I believe, nothing can be backed up, 100%, but I believe 99% for the people that are here, I'm going to say a 99% chance for those of you that are here, if you don't have an as seen on now, if you just do that, you're going to increase your authority positioning right away. Full stop. So if you take just that and you're not doing that now, that alone, I hope will be worth the hour you spend with me. Again, you may already have one, but if you don't. And the other thing is, as seen on banner, with Blue Talks, we don't typically design banners for people, but we tell them what logos they can use and all that. But you can get a banner designed on Upwork or Fiverr if you guys are familiar with those freelance sites. You guys can get a banner, your own as seen on banner designed for probably 40 bucks, even if you're not a technical person and can't do it yourself. So the other piece is, as I mentioned earlier, no excuse, right? If you can get it designed for $40, if you can go on 10 podcasts in the next 2 weeks and get the interviews, get the logos for them, build your banner, there's no reason not to have an as seen on banner in January, at some point in January. So the next piece is, so again, going back to the first, I showed you some pieces where you can build authority positioning by getting on magazines. And again, we'll dive into this a little bit more in a bit. But some of the things I showed you, like the as seen on and things like that, the as seen on banner, what you can do is get on podcasts right away, whether it's small podcasts, but podcasts that are looking. You can use radio guest lists, as I mentioned, or other sites where you actually sign up for free and they'll send you lists of people that are looking for guests. Get on some shows, get their logos, and now you have your as seen on. The next piece I would say for building credibility is having a newsletter. I'm not going to go too much into this because yesterday I did a whole training around building your email list, and I know some people on here were on it. So I don't want to go too far into it, but building a newsletter is great positioning. So if you actually have a newsletter that's coming out once a week or once a month or 4 times a month or every day, whatever that looks like, if you have a newsletter that's coming out regularly, and I got to get back to consistently, but consistently the same time every week or same time every day, that's going to start building your credibility. Now, it depends on what you put in the newsletter, but I shared this yesterday. But what my recommendation is to do the Gary V approach, which is he called it jab, 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 right hook. I don't know if you guys ever heard of that book by him, but the gist is the jabs are your asks, or sorry, gives. I mean, so what he said was give, 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 and then ask. So what he's really saying is give to your audience 4 or 3 times before you ever ask once. Does that make sense? So if you were, for example, if you were doing 4 emails a week, what that would look like is, okay, I'm going to do 3 emails where I'm going to teach, give you stuff for free, help you. And then the 4th email, I'm going to say, oh, did you know I have my new book out? I'd love for you to grab a copy. And he feels that's the proportion you should use on social media and with newsletters. So you have a newsletter, if you're doing 4 a month, do the first 3, just give. And then the 4th one, ask. So what is the content in that newsletter? Well, that's going to really go back to you, right? I mean, I know some people here will tell me they use AI and type their newsletter for once a week through AI. Anybody that knows me knows I've slowly been pulled into using AI, but I'm still not pulled into using AI for my newsletter. My newsletter, I feel for me personally, should be very I don't know what the word is, but I want it to be very me, like very authentic, but very me. And I also feel when I'm reading AI, I know I'm reading AI most of the time. Not all the time, most of the time. So I want it to be personal. And here's the thing, even if you go, okay, well, I don't want to write it myself. And you also say, but I don't want to use AI. I said this yesterday. Here's one thing you can do as well. You can actually take somebody else's article, let's say Jack Canfield. Let's say Jack Canfield put an article out. You could literally just share Jack's article and say the 5 things you love about what Jack said and have 1 paragraph. And then you get the credibility of being associated with that person. You also then they create the newsletter for you because you're sharing what they shared. You're not doing anything wrong, right? Because you're sharing what they shared publicly and saying, hey, this was my favorite article this week. It's by a person I'm a big fan of. And here's the 3 things I love that he said. Theoretically, at the very least, you could just say, I'm a big fan of this person's work, and here's a great article by them. What I mean is, you don't have to even create your own. Now, what the catch is, if you create your own, you're going to get a bit more authority positioning than if you say, check out Jack's, if that makes sense. So it's a catch-22, because with the Jack, when you share his, you're going to get maybe the association of a Jack benefit, but it's not going to look like you wrote it. You become almost the Larry King doing the interviews versus. So it's a personal positioning or a personal take where my brand, a lot of it is what I've learned from thought leaders. Here's what I'm going to teach you based on what I've learned with 7,500 interviews. If I share an article of Jack and say that, it's on brand for me. Does that make sense? It makes sense I would do it because that's what I do. In the book, even though it was a fictional parable, you'll see things me talking about. Les Brown shared this with us backstage. And it's a fictional take of what Les really shared with me. So for me, my brand is like Napoleon Hill to actually share what I've learned from these thought leaders. So for me, it's on brand. For you, it might not be. So, I'm not, I don't want to, like I said, I don't want to go too much into content creation, but I'll just say you have many options when it comes to your newsletter. But the big takeaway I want you to have is whatever way you use it, just make sure you're teaching and you're trying to create impact for the reader. That's, I think, the big takeaway. And then again, maybe try, because I think for most of us, if we can work within frameworks, it's helpful. So again, if you want to use that framework of Gary Vee, which is give 3 times before you ever ask. But here's the key. Gary does say over and over again, but the problem is a lot of people give and give and give and never ask. That's maybe just as bad as asking too much. So if you have no call to action ever, that could be just as bad as having too many calls to action. So, but the call to action, when I say take or ask, that could be just, hey, can you do me a favor and listen to my new podcast and share it? Like, I think sometimes we think the call to action has to be to get them to buy something. It doesn't. But what he's saying is you have to have some way you're saying, can you do me this favor? And I will tell you this, psychologically, if you've heard of mental triggers, people want to give back to you. If you've given to them 3 times, they want to give back. So if you say, can you share this? And they love your content, they're going to want to share it and help you. So you're doing them a disservice if you don't ask ever. So I'll leave that at that. But again, newsletter is another way to build authority. Another way is, and this is a huge one, is OPA. And I don't know if I'm making that up or if I heard that somewhere before. But if I say OPA, does anybody know, any guesses in the comments what I'm talking about? Like what that would stand for? Any guesses? And then I'll give you a hint, and then I'll give guesses, and then I'll tell you if not. There's a book by, close. Yes, Kelly hit it. Other People's Audiences. The hint I was going to give is there's a book by Robert Allen called Other People's Money. I think that's where the acronym came from, like OPM. But OPA, I don't know, again, I probably heard that from somebody else, Other People's Audiences, but that's affiliates. And I talked a little bit about this yesterday when we were talking about building email lists. But basically, there's 2 sides to it. I talked about how to build your email list with other people's audiences, meaning they like you, they share with you, all that kind of stuff. The other piece, though, is that by partnering with people, whether it's them sharing you on social media, so it doesn't even have to be they send people to a newsletter for you, they share your book, they share you on social media, or you partner together and run an event together, and then they're promoting to their audience, you're promoting yours. You do something you launch together and you promote to both your audiences, or whether you do a launch and they promote it for you. That's the power of other people's audiences. So what it really looks like is you build relationships with other people and they put you in front of their audience. And this is a great way to build expert positioning. So I'll give you a real world example. Whenever I did, and again, I think Susan, I think we met at Lisa Nichols' event. And I think there was somebody else I saw that was there as well. And so when you think about it, when I went to Lisa's event, I spoke for 10 minutes on Lisa's stage. That's Lisa's audience. That's another person's audience. But by Lisa putting me on her stage, and there's probably 50 people out of that 200-person event, 200 and some person in the audience, and then more on, I think there was 1,000 that registered virtually. But there's like 100 people, or 50 to 100, somewhere in between there, that I now know that are on my newsletter that I talked to that came because I was at that event. On top of that, Lisa shared our experts boot camp when we did it. So when we do our experts boot camp, the last one we did, we had 20, actually the one before that we had 2,600, I think, registered. That was from other people's audiences. For my own audience, it was probably 300. So, whatever that is, 10 times the amount of my own audience. Not only did they get added to my newsletter, but a large percentage of them watched the replay or watched it live. What I'm saying is that gave me credibility. Why? How? Because if Lisa says, check out Corey's new thing, check out my friend Corey's new thing, then that's her audience. Then if I go and say, oh, you got to check out Lisa's Ignite program, then she's using my audience. I'm sharing her with my audience. Does that make sense to everybody? So another way to become an authority is to get in with other people's audiences because they're lending you their credibility. They're lending you their trust. They're saying, you can trust Susan. She's a good friend of mine. And then now you get to benefit from that credibility. So other people's audiences is another way. And again, I'm talking a lot about the what way you can build credibility today. Some of the how is a bit hard to dive into. In other words, how do I dive into how I built over 15 years the relationships I built? Like that's a big piece, right? Like there's a lot to that. One thing I will give you a hint. I will give you one hint. One of the things that I always visually looked at when I was building relationships, and by the way, this can go for any relationship you build. It could be a one-person business owner, somebody that's not maybe at the highest level. It could be somebody that's it was hard to reach for years, whatever that looks like. Here's how I work. I always say I'm building a relationship bank. Now I struggle with it sometimes because bank seems like more of a cold corporate thing versus the relationship side, but visually it works for me. But the idea is, I say I'm building a relationship bank. So what I will do is I see Tammy on my screen. So if I met Tammy, the idea might be that I'll try to build equity in our relationship before I ever take from the relationship bank. So if I might say, Tammy, you should come over to PEI and we should interview you if Tammy doesn't ask, wink, wink, and interview you for our show, and then bring her over. She comes over to interview the show. And while she's here, I might say, hey, we should do this and try to give. And so the idea I have visually is let's just use dollars. Let's say every time I put a deposit in the relationship, I'm putting $100 in. My idea is, okay, maybe I build it up to whatever that value is. Like maybe I build it up to $1,000, 10 gives. And then all of a sudden I say, hey, can you help me with this one thing? Chances are, I think we most know, both all know, if I built up with 10 gives, that person's probably going to say sure to the one ask. But then I go, okay, well, I got to keep building now. I can't just take the 10 back. I got to always have an equity. So the way I look at the relationship bank is I got to build an equity and keep an equity. So as an example, another example, because this was like real world, people asked me how I got this endorsement on my book, was Mark Victor Hansen. So if you guys know who Mark was co-creator of Chicken Soup for the Soul. And when I met Mark, I interviewed him once and I promoted the heck out of him, but I never asked for anything. And then a couple of years later, he came to me near COVID and said, I have a new book out called Ask, by the way, kind of ironic. And he said, we're trying to promote it on podcasts. And so we did the interview. And at the end of the interview on the air, Mark said, do you know of other shows that would be willing to feature us, Corey? And I said, I'm sure I know some. So let me work on it. Within about a week, I got Mark on got him in touch with about 25 hosts. I looked at it at the time. The combination of listener slash viewership was in about the 5 million range. So, in other words, we tried to get Mark in front of 5 million people with his new book and never asked for a thing. I just kept saying, oh, yeah, yeah. And I kept, trying to put more out there. And then I asked Mark if he wanted to be interviewed for a documentary we were doing. And when he found out some of his friends were in it, then he wanted to be in it. I did a bunch of these things. And then one day I said to Mark, hey, Mark, we're doing an event at MIT. Would you be willing to speak at the event? And I'm not going to go into financial details because that wouldn't be fair to him. But what I can tell you is I had to force him to pay anything. And to hire Mark to speak at your event is not cheap. I had to force him to pay anything because I'd given so much. Then I went and deposited a few more times because I never like to take two withdrawals at once. And then what happened was when I was doing the book, I said, Mark, I have the new book coming out. I think you'd like it. And I said it's kind of like Og Mandino, and I knew Mark was friends with Og Mandino. And so Mark said, well, tell me about the book. And so we were on the phone for like 15 minutes, told him the whole book, story, everything. He goes, I love it. It is like Augie's books. He said, and I still got it on my phone. He said, press record. Can you, and I said, yeah, I got a second phone. I'll record it on it. He said, record this, Corey, and that's the endorsement. And then it was done. What I'm saying is that was so much easier than me going to Mark if he didn't know me and say, would you be willing to endorse my book? But you know what it also took? Years of building a relationship using the relationship bank. So back to the point of when people say to me, how can I build these relationships? I refer to the relationship bank. Think about your relationships and try to build them where you're putting in, and then eventually you ask. Most people, I sad to say, a lot of people these days want the microwave answer. So I'll have people reach out to me and say, hey, Corey, I want to get Lisa Nichols involved in my book. Can you shoot her a text and ask her? No, that's a hard no. Because I might get one ask a year with Lisa, and I'm not going to burn the bridge down by asking for 5 other people who she doesn't know. Will you jump on my podcast that I just launched yesterday? It doesn't make sense. But my point is, I didn't do that either. And I'm not saying you shouldn't build relationships where somebody gives you a referral. Like in other words, let's say if we were working together and we did a bunch of stuff together, and then you had a book out and you're like, Corey, I would love to have Lisa Nichols endorse it. I'm not saying I wouldn't go to Lisa's team and say, hey, is there any chance you guys would be okay with me sending a proposal off of this person. And if you guys like it, get in touch with that person. So I'm not saying I'll never, give a referral. I'm just saying that you have to build some of it on your own. So again, that was a big tangent on the other people's audiences, but it's that powerful. You think about it, if I can go, when I put my book out, I actually was able to get in front of millions, and I'm not stretching that number, millions. And by the way, when I say that, I'm even including the fact that open rates are only 20, 25%. I was in front of millions of people with my book because of other people's audiences. I never could have reached them on my own. So I built all this equity I'm talking about, and now I cash in every now and then. But it's worth it because I put in the work. It's worth it because now when I ask, the answer is almost always yes from people. So you guys know Joe Vitale, Dr. Joe Vitale? So Joe has on Instagram has over 200 million followers. And Joe gave me carte blanche. He said, anytime we do an interview or whatever, Corey, chop it up in pieces if you want. Add me as a collaborator, and I'll accept. And what that does, just so you know, is that takes that video and puts it to Joe's audience as if Joe posted it. So when we did a flyer on my book when it came out with Joe's testimonial and a video, and I can see the numbers in the back end because I'm a collaborator. 175,000 people saw my book from that one post. How could I have done that on my own? So does that make sense, by the way, for everybody? So again, that's a big area, other people's audiences. Another way you can build authority and positioning is to launch a podcast, host a podcast, or be on a podcast. Now, I want to clarify, I don't recommend everybody host a podcast. I don't think everybody realizes how much work's involved in a podcast. Why is it that, and I don't know if you guys know the numbers, I don't know if they're still the same, but they used to be that the average podcast, what they call burn rate, or when they stopped doing it, was 9 episodes. So think about that. The average person never makes it past 9 episodes. Why is that? They were super excited when they launched. Will we agree with that? They were probably pumped and ready to take on the world. So why do they stop? For the most part, I think it's a combination of two things: how much work's involved and how little it looks like the return is. So what do I mean by that? I mean, I think a lot of people go in and say, I'm going to launch a podcast and I'm going to be the guy that gets 1 million downloads this week. Everybody thinks big numbers. Like, I'm going to go in and get big numbers. What usually happens for most people is you launch a podcast, there's a little bit of tumbleweeds and dust, and you have 6 listeners. That's usually what happens. And guess what? That happens for more than 9 episodes. So you think of the average person, they put all this effort, hours into it, and then they get, maybe if they're lucky, their biggest episode has 45 listeners. They're like, why would I do all this for 45 people? And they're also thinking if 9 episodes had only gone to 20 or 30 or 45, it's never going to grow. But here's the thing. Most people discover when they're consistent for a year, after a year, that's when their podcast goes. Why? Most people quit after 9 episodes. So you're in the lower competition whenever you stick around. But most people don't last that long. And what I'm here to say is if you want to get into a podcast, plan on doing it for a year to see what happens. Because otherwise, you're probably going to be disappointed. But I also make this case. When people say, oh my God, why would I do all this for 50 people? I ask the question to them, let me ask you this question if you're a speaker. Would you walk down the street to speak in front of 50 of your ideal audience? Like, would you go down the street to speak in front of 50 of the ideal people that can buy your product? And they say, oh, every day of the week. But yet you're walking away from podcasting when you have 50 or 45 of the ideal people. And podcasting is even more intimate. You're in their ears. So you're actually building a stronger relationship. So what I'm getting at is don't think of 50 people as only 50 people. If you have 50 people on a Zoom, that's a big deal. So again, I think we just have false expectations with podcasting. So here's my takeaway from that is don't go into podcasting unless you realize how much work you're in for, especially if you're going to self-produce. That's even in a whole other conversation. But if you're going to do everything yourself, edit it, everything yourself, expect a lot of work for what looks like little reward at the beginning. But here's what podcasting does let you do. If you do want to get other people's audiences, you can strategically work hard to get the right guests on your podcast, and you have a reason to get them in front of you. So in other words, here's what I would do as a strategy. Let's say I wanted to launch, let's say I want to get a traditional publishing deal. Everybody seems to want to get a traditional publishing deal. It's almost impossible to get. Here's what I would do if I were you, if I want to get a traditional publishing deal. I would launch a podcast about publishing and maybe call it the tips the top publishers don't want you to know. And then I would invite top publishers onto the show. And then I would build relationships with them without ever asking for a thing. And then after maybe 6 months, and I've had 25 like publishers like HarperCollins, top editor, and all these people on, then I would say, hey, I just happen to have a book. Do you have any advice on what I should do with it? Don't act like you're asking them to sign the book. Say, do you have some advice? But now you have 45 or 50 top publishers that you know, that they know who you are because you got them on the show. Plus, you got to learn from them. Plus, you got the content and all the other stuff. And you can do that for anything. Like I would do that if I wanted to get on, if I was a stand-up comic, and I wanted to get booked often, what I'd be doing is starting a podcast, and I would bring on the people that run the top clubs across North America. So Laugh Factory, Yuck Yucks, whatever. I would invite them onto my show, interview them, get to know them, because now I'm on their radar if I want to get a booking. And I can say, and again, I build the relationship first, give first. But then I can say, hey, if you ever have a cancellation, or hey, can I send you a clip of me performing at this club? But now you're in their loop. So I think you can leverage a podcast a lot of ways. Another thing you could do, which a lot of people do these days, is you can start a podcast, figure out who your ideal client is, and invite that ideal client onto the show. Now, follow me here. Let's say I wanted speakers to sign up for Blue Talks. I can start a podcast saying, I'll just talk out loud, but the 5 tips you can learn from the world's best speakers or something like that. And then I can target speakers who would be a good fit for Blue Talks, invite them on the show, interview them, talk about Blue Talks because it's part of the interview. And what will happen, not what could happen, what will happen in some cases is they'll reach out and say, how can I get on a Blue Talk stage, Corey? Do you see what I mean? So in other words, bring your ideal audience on the podcast. Don't pitch them. Bring them on and just talk about how you help people, learn from them, and now you have your actual client on the show. So we have one of our better clients that signed up. And I say better, I mean, it's not no client's better, but like they signed up for a lot of stuff. And how I met him is he invited me on his podcast. And I made sure to talk about Blue Talks and stuff because that's what I want to talk about anyway. And afterwards he said, Corey, I think I might be a good fit for Blue Talks. And he signed up within about a month to speak on 3 of our stages, to be on the New York Times billboard, and a few other things, all within a month. So again, podcasting can be one of the ways you get, to the client. But going back to the original point, 2 ways to build authority. One, be a podcast host. The other one, be a guest. If you're going to be a podcast host, there's 2 options. 1, interview people. 2, you just do, here's Katana's 5 tips for this. Every day you do tips, or every podcast episode you do tips. The benefit of that one, it's a lot easier. Let's say you want to do 5 tips. If I did 5 tips for launch or landing a TEDx, let's say, well, I can go do those. I record 1 minute each, let's say. I record them, upload them, I'm done. Inviting a guest, having them show up, interviewing a guest, knowing what to say, finding the right guest, convincing them to come on your show. Would you agree that's a lot more work than just you showing up and press record? So it is a lot more work. And here's the other thing. When you're the interviewer, the guest is the expert. So when you have the show, over time, you become the curator that they trust, but the guest is the expert. So if you want to be the expert, the better way to do that would be to host your own show where you don't have guests, or a mix of the 2. That's one side. That's hosting a podcast. The other side is being a podcast guest. I'm just going to say to you, it's way easier. You don't have to deal with any of the logistics at all. You just show up, be your amazing self, share your insight, and move on. So I'm not going to say what you should do. For me, I chose the podcast host, obviously, and the guest. What I will say is this, though. Here's where a lot of people, I'm trying to hopefully give you ideas, too, for where people make mistakes. So here's another, I guess I said I wasn't going to really go into lead funnels and leading traffic, but I guess I am sort of with some of the stuff I'm sharing. Here's another one that will lead people back to you. The numbers will vary, but it will work, is if you do go on podcasts, maybe you say once a week on Tuesdays is the day I do podcast interviews. I don't know if you guys know who John Lee Dumas is from Entrepreneurs on Fire. John has a show with 2.5 million listeners. If John, a month, I should say, if John comes on your show, the deal is he'll do it on a Monday and you get 15 minutes. If you're at 14 and a half, John will say, okay, we got 30 seconds. And you'll be on dead air. He'll hang up on you at 15 minutes if you go over. And that's how he does his. He's a machine, right? He comes from the military, so he does and I say he doesn't take a break, so he does 4 an hour, and he does that for 10 hours a day. So on Mondays, he can pump out 40 interviews that he gets promoted on. Anyway, that's what John does. But what I'm getting at as far as this goes is the thing a lot. So I guess I was getting back to pick a certain day if you want to be on podcast, because it's a certain flow and a momentum that you want to stay in. So I would pick a day, a month, or a day a week that you want to be in shows. But here's the thing I wanted to tell you about it. What most people don't do is they get on the show and they don't have a call to action. They share this great stuff. People love them. And then they say, all righty, have a good day then. See you later. And that's it. but nobody knows how to reach you or why they should want to. So what you need to have, and it's very, again, no cost almost at all, is have a lead magnet. So have a one-page website, if you've heard of that, a one-page website with a lead magnet, which basically just means you have a one-page website, and the whole goal is the person either signs up for your email list or they leave the site. No other goal. That's all you want, yes or no. Sign up for my list or leave the site. In return for signing up the list, here's what I want to give you. And let's say it's the 5 tips for landing a TEDx. So then I would go on the podcast, and the podcast host, you can cue this up beforehand, will say, Corey, is there anything else you'd like to share? Well, if it's okay, I'd love to give your audience a free gift. Yo, that sounds great, Corey. Awesome. What I'd love to give people is whatever, and I'll call it, say, a guide or a manual, 5 tips for how to land your TEDx talk, completely free on me. And just go to landingyourtedxtalk.com. That, by the way, I don't know if that's a real website, but go there and they'll go there and they'll see a page that, oh, thank you for listening to me on whatever episode or however you want to word the landing page. I just wanted to give you the free gift I promised. Sign up here and get your landing your TEDx offer. And then what happens is now they're in my email list. So I have the ability to future market to them. But what it does is I go on the show, at the end, I drive people somewhere. So they loved me, let's say. I gave them great insight. Now I send them somewhere, and now that's my email list. How does that turn into your business later? Well, later on, when you want to offer something, you push a button on your email and say, hey, here's our offer for the day, and hopefully people sign up. Does that make sense to everybody? So your funnel is get on the podcast, offer something for free. You can do this, by the way, if you're hosting the show, you can also say, hey, thanks for tuning into the whatever show. We want to give you a free gift before we kick off the episode. Grab your 5 tips for whatever. And you can still send them the same way. But the point is, you always should have a call to action. It doesn't have to sell anything. It could just be getting them to your list. What I will tell you, I shared this yesterday. There's never been an email. I have to do that again. There hasn't been an email in the last couple of years, at least, that I've sent out where I've sent out an email where I said, hey, do you want to speak on a TEDx stage this year or a Blue Talk stage or whatever that looks like? Any email I send out with a call to action, every single one in the last 3 years has generated revenue. So when people say to me, well, how can I make money for my business? Well, build an email list so then you have a reason to make an offer down the road. And again, going back to the podcast, use a podcast, yours or somebody else's, as where you drive that traffic from. There's lots of ways you can do that. Another way is to run your own events and stuff like that. One thing I will caution you, just in case anybody here is ever thinking of it, is if you haven't done it already, be careful. And if you have done it, you'll know why I'm saying this. A lot of people get the idea or enticement that I'm going to run a summit, a virtual summit. I'm going to invite 40 people. They're going to share it with their email list. And I'm going to have 100,000 people on my email list next month. And what people end up finding out is they do 40 interviews. It's a nightmare. They never expected it to be so much work. I mean, it's 40 hours if you have hour-long interviews just to get them recorded. Then you got to edit them. Then you got to set up a website. Then you got to set up a website that releases them at certain times. And what ends up happening in my experience is, let's say you go to people and say you have to have 10,000 on your list and there's 10 of you sharing it. So let's get real on numbers. If 10 people, each with 10,000 people on their email list, send out that email, you guys may or may not know this, but open rates can vary. But let's say, because we don't know, we're just going to say lower side, your open rates might be 15%. So first and foremost, that means you're down to 15,000 people that will ever even know you're running the event. But then what's the open rate? And so ultimately, what I've talked to many, many people who were so pumped, and I don't want to burst people's bubbles. I'm telling you guys this now because you're not planning to run the event or you haven't told me about it. But I wouldn't tell you it if you told me you're running an event tomorrow. I don't want to burst your bubble, but almost every person I know that has done this has said, Corey, I end up having like 180 people sign up for my email. And you guys can probably guess the cost of recording 40 interviews, putting up the website, promoting it, all that stuff. And then you have 140 people sign up, and then 3 people sign up for your offer. Maybe 20 sign up for your gift, your VIP. So if you're lucky, you end up making like $3,000 and get 100 and some people on your email list, and you spent probably hundreds of hours doing it. But everybody seems to think, I think because people think when you send it out to 100,000 people, somehow people I think that means 100,000 people will actually see it. And it's just not the way it works. And even people that see it, you think about yourself. I'm sure you've opened emails where you're like, oh yeah, and you didn't read it. Or you said, I'm busy, I'll get to that later. So even if 15,000 open it, that's nowhere near the amount of people that actually read that email. Maybe it's down to 7,000. But then they're not the people that clicked on the link to even see what the event is. You get where I'm going with this, right? I mean, I'm telling you, so I'll back this up. When we do our experts boot camp, I just kind of told you, right? We have one person, one affiliate out of 100 and some that has 2.5 million people on our email list. And so that means when we crunch the numbers, over 4 million people theoretically have opened the emails to see our boot camp, and we got 2,500 registered. Think about those numbers. So, and by the way, the overall number was probably about 15 million that it was sent to. So we had to send to 15 million people multiple times to get to over 2,000 signed up. And most of the people that run these summits don't have 15, 20 million people seeing it. Does that make sense, everybody? It's not meant to be a burst your bubble. I just want to be realistic because I don't want to see you waste 100 hours to learn this. I know somebody very close and one of our clients who just went through this like 2 weeks ago and just said to me, Corey, I mean, I can't believe I did this. Like I had a person one time that told me like they actually borrowed against their house to launch the summit because they thought it was going to be game changing and it wasn't. And by the way, I will add the caveat. If you're somebody like Gary Vee, if Gary Vee ran that same summit, or let's go bigger, you guys know what's his name? Hermosi, Alex Hermosi. If he ran that summit, that thing would probably make $20 million and have 300,000 people there. But we're not all Alex Hermosi. It's only going to be usually the biggest of the big names that are going to run a summit like that, and everything's going to be like as rosy as we think it is. So just be cautious. You can still do it if you want, but be cautious. Okay, so a couple more, and then I want to just ask any questions as we're bringing things down. Also, I shared it earlier, but never underestimate the value or power of having a niche book on your industry, whatever you're trying to sell. Having a book, like if you're a coach, having a book about coaching, or if you're like if you help people land TEDx, like what's his name, Carmine Gallo, who I've interviewed years ago. He has a book called what's his one called? Talk. I'm looking over here. It's on the wall. Talk Like TED. So of course he helps people with build their speaking careers. He has one of his is called The Presentation Secrets of Steve Jobs. Another one's called Talk Like TED. Another is The Secrets of the World's Top 12 Communicators. Does that make sense? Why he would do those books? You know, he's trying to convince you and show you he's the communications expert that you go to when you want to become a better speaker. So never underestimate the value of putting out a book on your niche. Email signature is something a lot of people don't use properly, or I should say at all. Never forget that your email signature is probably the best real estate you have for communicating with clients. And most people don't have an email signature or they don't have a good one. And good is subjective, but what I mean is they don't have one that shows and demonstrates who they are. So make sure you use your email signature. Also, if you go to live events ever, this is something I highly recommend people do. And a lot of people don't think of this either. But if you go to live events, and you're at the event with experts or influencers and you get to talk to them. You saw on my page, there's a lot of photos of me with celebrities and thought leaders. Lucky for me, I've done so many interviews over the years. Most of those are authentic. They're not like Comic-Con pictures because you could do this through Comic-Con if you spent the money. But what I'm getting at is if you're going to events all the time and meeting influencers, get photos with them. It's going to be powerful later on. Secondly, if you're going to do that and you're going to a big event where you're going to meet 20, let's say, here's a little, I'll call it pro tip, is bring extra shirts so that you can wear different shirts so it doesn't look like every photo was taken within the same hour. Secondly, remove that lanyard. You don't want it to seem like you're an attendee at the event. Does that make sense? It's just positioning, right? And then the one last piece is, people always ask me how to reach big name influencers. Here's one little tip, or I guess it's a multi-part tip, is if you want to get on the radar of big name influencers, one thing you could do if they have a book is I did this and it worked really well. Go and snapshot quotes you love from their book, or like articles, or not articles, I mean insights or wisdom or whatever. Go snapshot them, highlight them, and take that screenshot and then post it and say, hey, Gary Vee's new book, whatever it is, jab, 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 right hook. I love when he talks about this. And you include that and tag Gary Vee in. And my system is do that 10 days in a row. So if it was Jack Canfield, put Jack Canfield's quote up, post it 10 days in a row, tag Jack in. And I bet you odds are going to be very high that Jack's not going to ignore you sharing his stuff 10 times without expecting anything in return. So it's a way to get on the radar. And then once you're on the radar, then you could reach out and say, hey, Jack has retweeted my stuff or whatever that looks like. Jack reshared my stuff that I shared. And I just want to see if he might be up for doing an interview. I have this new show and whatever that looks like. But my point is it opens up the door. And then hopefully his team goes, yeah, we've been seeing you share that stuff. Thanks so much. But again, sharing people's stuff. Another one you can use is go to the website of the person you want to interview and see who endorses them. And then if you have access to those people, or you know how to get access to those people, reach out to them. So if I go to Jack Canfield, my first time reaching out to him, it was 4 months of no's. Finally, I got creative. I went to Jack's website. I seen that a guy named Dan Sullivan had endorsed Jack. I don't know if you guys know Dan Sullivan is. He runs Strategic Coach. So Dan wasn't as high profile at the time. He wasn't trying to be, but he had done an interview in Success Magazine with Darren Hardy, and he said he loved the interview. I knew I had the same interview style, so I reached out and said, "Hey, here's a clip of my interview style. I'd love to have Dan on the show." My thinking was, I want Dan on the show anyway, but what if I bring up Jack a few times? Maybe Dan will help me get to Jack. So see what I mean? I went to Jack's site. Who's endorsing Jack? So it's almost like, who do you know? And so Dan then knew me. Well, in the interview, Dan said, "Corey, you should bring Jack on the show. He'd love it. And tell him Dan said so." So what I did was I cropped that audio. I sent it to Jack's team and I said, even Dan, Jack's coach, thinks Jack should come on my show. And they replied same day, "Corey, here's the link to book Jack on your show." So again, the strategy is, who knows the person you want to get on the show? And how do you know them? You might be 3 degrees away from Dan, but you might be 9 away from Jack. So get to the shorter one. And then the last piece is Amazon has a coming soon that starts like way in advance. So if you wanted to have Matthew McConaughey on your show, and Matthew, you saw somewhere he said, "Oh, I'm writing a book about blah, blah, blah," go to Amazon. And I'm just using him as the example, but you can go do this. You could actually just go to Amazon coming soon, a year from now, seeing what they're releasing a year from now, and then seeing who you want to interview that's on that list. But the takeaway I want you to know is you can go see who's releasing a book a year from now, and the better time to reach out to them, I think you would agree, is when they're just starting to schedule their interviews, or they haven't even started yet. If you try to reach them when it's a month away from Matthew McConaughey releasing the book, all his interviews are booked. In fact, by the way, when Matthew released, I think it was Green Lights, or it was his children's book, one of the two. I found him on the coming soon, but the problem was it was 6 weeks away. It was coming out in 6 weeks. I went to his team and they said, "Corey, if you would have reached us 2 months sooner, we would have done the interview for sure." I was just too late. But what I'm getting at is, most people don't know a book's coming out, but Amazon tells you a certain amount of time beforehand. And that's the time to get somebody to get on your show, because they're wanting to promote it and they're not sure how many interviews they're going to have. So they'll book one earlier on because they haven't booked anything yet. You're getting in when nobody else is there. You're not competing with the low-hanging fruit. So use Amazon's coming soon. Go back as far as you can. See who has a book coming out, and then now you have a reason to reach out to interview them. If you don't want to do a podcast, do a Facebook Live. But just say, "Hey, I saw Matthew has a book coming out in 9 months. Just wonder if you guys have started scheduling the media yet for it." Own the sale. Act like, "Oh, well, have you scheduled it yet? Because I definitely want to be in the queue." But anyway, that's another piece you can use to get under the radar of big names, because it's easier to get them on your show, like I say, when they have a book coming out, because that's when they want to promote something. And it's easier to do that whenever nobody knows they have a book coming out yet. But you will, because most people don't use the Amazon coming soon. So in about 45 minutes, hopefully there was a big download of stuff that you can do to increase your influence and your expert positioning. One last piece I want to mention is make sure you have high quality headshots. That's another important piece. When we do our books and everything else, you would not believe how much work we have to do to get all the people that are in the book to send us a quality headshot. Some have them, some don't, but it's a lot of work. So you make people's lives easier. If you want to get on a big show, you want to get on an interview on something, you want to get taken seriously, you want to get booked for an event, you have to have headshots. And the other thing you should have is a bio. A short bio, a bit longer bio, but have a bio. Those are things you definitely want to have. And this is going to go, it's a weird last thing to say, but this is going to go against what a lot of people feel. But I will tell you, I put a post out about this on Facebook, and the response was closer to how I feel. I asked people their thoughts on AI headshots for business, and almost whatever the comments was, let's say there were 50, whatever the number was, 48 said never. And meaning, like, in other words, they were saying, like, I was asking people, I said, "I wonder why." And people were saying, "I wouldn't hire somebody if they sent me an AI headshot." So, I know a lot of people say, "No, but it's great because I can put myself with running with the Bulls." My question is why? If you never ran with the Bulls, why does that matter? But either way, people are doing that all the time. What I'm saying, if you're going to do it, just don't do it, in my opinion, don't do it with professional headshots. And again, when I put it out there to the world, most people said that it really bothered them when they could tell it was AI. And then, of course, the argument people make is, "Well, you can't tell that mine's AI." Well, I have a really good friend. and I won't say much more than this, but because you'll know who the person is. But I have a really good friend, and she's using AI photos, and I asked her, and other people thought, "Oh no, that's not." I asked her because I know her well enough. Is that AI photo? She goes, "Yep." And again, so I saw it. Why was I able to see it? I saw it somehow. I just didn't feel like her fully. And so my point is just use with caution. I'm not the boss of you, by the way. If you want to use AI photos, do it. If you want to use an AI photo of you as a man, if you're a woman, that's on to you. Like that's up to you. But I'm just saying, I did like my own little survey, and what I seen was a lot of people are pushing back against the idea of AI headshots. And so I would just say it doesn't cost as much as most people make it seem to get a professional headshot. Like a friend of mine, I got her to do a professional headshot of me. Her name's Kathy Dugay. She did professional headshots of me 8 years ago. Thankfully, I had a shaved head then because if I didn't, it wouldn't work. But those photos, I still share them now, and people say, "Oh, Corey, I love this new photo of you." So I paid for photos once 10 years ago, and I'm still using them today. Now I've done other headshots since, but my point is, I'm still using those ones. So I don't believe it's too, like people always say, "Oh, well, AI is cheaper, it's quicker." I don't believe it's that costly to get a headshot. I really don't. So I'll leave that with you. We're at the end as far as time wise. I'll just open up and ask, is there any questions at all? Like I'm willing to stay around 5 or 10 minutes. If there is any questions, whether you put your hand up and come on the screen or whether you ask in the chat, but if you have to run as well, I didn't advertise a certain amount of time, but I always like to keep it an hour. So we literally hit the hour right now. If you are going to jump off, my question for you in the comments in the chat, because I haven't been able to read any yet, is hopefully this has been valuable for you. It wasn't a formal thing, but hopefully this kind of data dump was helpful in terms of some ideas for different ways you can increase your influence, increase your help your expert business, reach more people, and some strategy around how you can actually do some of this stuff. So I'm just going to take a peek if there is any questions. I wrote a question earlier. How many things, links would you recommend for an email signature? Funny enough, I would say not as many as I have. So my approach often is overwhelm people with social proof. So I have too many things, but it's somewhat intentional. It's the same reason if you ask me for a couple of testimonials, I'll send you 10. Because I believe a person will go, wow, if he has 10 within a minute to send me, how many does he actually have? So, Sandra, same idea. I have a lot of links, but I would say, realistically, what I think is probably better than what I have would be like if you have a video of you that's going to demonstrate your expertise, I would include a video link. I would probably include maybe, and you might or you may not want to, but I might include a testimonial, like just a one line. It could be just like best speaker ever, and then the name if it's real. But I'd have maybe a testimonial. I'd have a website, my website. I'd have maybe a video, and your website could be a YouTube channel. So I would say I would probably have 4 or 5 links. Like I said, mine is way more, but what I do, which is not efficient either, is if it's somebody I correspond with normally, if I have to put something in the email, I'll crop out the bottom part. So I send shorter ones to people that already know me, longer ones. The automatic one is longer. When I click send, it's really long. It's too long. But I've had people that have gone to the bottom thing and said, I hired you because of that bottom thing. So I don't know. It's catch 22. But Sandra, I would just go with 4 or 5 or something like that. 4 or 5 links. Um, Oh, good. Dolores said she signed up for radio guest list. I'm just checking to make sure there's no other questions before we run. And like I said, if you have a question and you want to come on the screen, that's cool too. But if we're all good, that's also cool.
Hey Corey, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, for sure.
So this has all been super helpful, by the way. Thank you for sharing some of your wisdom in this call. My question is, with all the work you've done with these thousands of interviews and your experience being on lots of stages, presenting professionally as a speaker, what are some changes that you're noticing in the professional speaking world? Like, where is the professional speaking world going? Like the in-person professional speaking world, I suppose is my question for you.
Yeah, it's a great question, Tony. And interestingly, I think some people feel, or I'll say it differently. I think some people thought by now there wouldn't be hardly any live speaking left. Like I think every year people are thinking, oh, it's going to disappear next year because of AI or whatever. And the fascinating part is last year, now numbers are subjective because people make stats and they're of their own all the time. But the Meeting Planners International, I saw a thing they put out, and they said last year was the largest number of events that have ever taken place live in person in history. So what I'm getting at, Tony, is that it only seems to be growing live. And I actually don't think AI is going to kill that. I've said to people, like, I'm at our boot camp, our experts boot camp. I said, when we made our offer, I said, the reason you may want to sign up to work with us is because I actually think speaking is going to be the last one that goes. Like I think you're going to see people that working somewhere else and they get a package because there's no longer a job there. Some of those people are probably going to realize they can go into the speaking world. So I actually think you're going to see more speakers flood the speaking world. That's one side. The second thing is I think you're going to see more live events. It's going to keep continuing to grow because our population is growing. There's more companies. I think you're going to see it continue to grow. As far as how it'll evolve, I would have told you. So this is why I don't want to have a crystal ball, Tony, because I would been wrong already on this. I would have told you 5 years ago we'd have more hybrid than we do now. I thought it would have been more hybrid. When I say hybrid, I mean more like five virtual speakers that are on the screen and five that are there live. And it's still more like eight or nine there live and only one or two virtual. And usually the virtuals because they have to be there for some reason virtual. So what I'm getting at is to me, it hasn't changed as much as I already thought it would. So if I were a betting person, I would say that the nature of the industry is probably not going to change a whole lot. But what will probably change is how we hire speakers, how we find speakers, AI's impact on it. So in other words, I saw a lady, Mari Smith. I don't know if you guys know who she is, but she's a Facebook uh, guru. And Mari said that her new thing now is she's putting in clauses in her speaking contracts about AI, but how they can use her image, how it can be used to promote it, if they can share stuff after using AI. So in other words, it's more how is AI going to affect the speaking business, just like it is with actors, right? Like it's affecting Hollywood. So in other words, what is AI's part if you do a talk at an event? Like how much can AI use that and how can they use AI related to your talk? Can they use AI, for example, to generate your bio? Are you okay with that? Like, I think it's going to be more the tech side that might change, but I don't think anything about once you get at the event is going to be changed much, if that makes sense. Also, how you hire the person, like, for example, I've been booked recently and got clients recently who found me using ChatGPT. 6 months ago, that hadn't happened at all. And now I've had multiple. A guy that works with us now, Vinny Hick, who's in Toronto actually, Tony. He signed up with us. Well, he found Rosalind Fung. I don't think Rosalind's on here with us today, but he found Rosalind Fung and got talking to her on LinkedIn. But he found her through ChatGPT. And then he said to Rosalind, "I want to get into speaking." And she goes, "Oh, I can't. I won't say I can't, but she said, I won't help you with that. But here's the guy who will." What I'm saying is that client, who's an amazing client, came to us from ChatGPT. So I think you're going to see more people going on chat to hire speakers and find speakers than ever before. So I think it's just going to be the how that changes. But I think once you get to the event and you getting hired won't change much. And also the way you speak at the event probably won't change much. By the way, another way AI could affect things is whether or not they can create a second talk of you as an AI person that they show at the next event. That's why this lady said she heard that some people are actually starting to do that. They're actually starting to hire a speaker and then have them speaking at the event the next year using AI. And so she's like, I'm going to put a clause saying they can't do that. I think it's going to be more of those things. And the last piece I'll say on it, when it comes to I'm trying, as far as hiring the speaker and what you pay them, the good news is I don't think what you pay them has changed much. Again, what happens when they get to the event hasn't changed. People are still pretty much using PowerPoint. Like, I look at speaking now and really 10 years ago, it didn't look that much different if you think about it. Like you think about when you're at the event, when you were at our event live, there was nothing different about that event than an event 10 years ago at all once you're on site. So I think, Tony, it's not going to change as much as we think, but I do think we're going to have more speakers flooding the business. And then at the same time, I think how people find the speakers is going to change. One last piece on that is we do a Meet the Meeting Planner every month where we bring meeting planners on and speakers can pitch them. And I found it fascinating. One of the people said, she goes, "I love that you're doing this and getting me in front of speakers." She said, "Because it beats what I normally do, which is going on Google and trying to track down and find the right speaker." And it fascinated me in 2025 that she's still saying she's not using referrals. She's still going on and Googling. And by the way, this is a huge conference that they hire like 30 speakers for. Now, I think probably what it is they've gone through so many speakers, they have a hard time finding referrals. But it's still amazing that people are still using Google to find a speaker from scratch when there's this many speakers out here trying to get a gig. So for what that's worth, that was a long rant to say I think it's going to be pretty much the same, but I think AI is going to have an impact on the how we get there, how the events run, how they select a speaker, and all that kind of stuff. Did that help, Tony? Like, does that kind of tie into what you were asking?
Yep, fantastic. Thank you. Yeah, no, I appreciate it. I think we are heading into the authenticity economy right now and more in-person things. If we can show up as consultants, speakers, coaches in person, then we're going to build trust and do a lot better. So I appreciate your answer. Thank you.
Amazing. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. And I will say, I used to talk about it in customer service, but we keep going. As you said, we go through those eras. And even with customer service, I think it used to be like customer service. Then it was customer satisfaction. Then it was personalized customer service. And so, same idea. I think, what they're saying now, we're in either the trust or the authenticity currency. And I believe that to be true. I think we just left the personalization one where people want everything personalized to them. That's just for what that's worth. And I see you have your hand raised. And I do see another question in the chat I will tackle.
Hey, thank you so much. I have two questions actually. One, you'll notice I don't have a virtual background anymore. I actually have a stage background. I
Yep.
want your take on it because I started doing videos and stuff. So I'm building a YouTube channel. I started a podcast. So I purposely did this, but I was always using virtual backgrounds and I notice it glitches, especially I've got smaller hands. So I do this a lot, being a maritimer. And so the virtual backgrounds, you lose your finger, like you lose aspects of your body. And I noticed doing my podcast because it's YouTube, people that had virtual backgrounds, it really impacted the quality if they were moving around or if they didn't have good lighting or good cameras. What's your take on that? Because I was told to do this, and I always had virtual backgrounds in the past. So, what's your take when it comes to quality showing up on other people's podcasts? Because I know lighting is important. You're like, I don't have a mic on my computer today, but normally the mic's plugged in because I wasn't planning on speaking. And I had another part too that I was going to ask you. Anyway, I'll let you answer that one first.
Okay, so my answer is probably kind of self-evident, just in the fact that I'm in front of a actual background. It's not a back screen or a screen or anything. It's an actual background. So for me, and what it comes down to is where am I at the time. So if I'm at the office or if like this, at home right now, meaning I'm in town. I'm in the office, but in town. So if I'm in town, and I have multiple, as you guys see with the boot camp, I have multiple backdrops, but they're all backdrops. They're not actual green screens or anything. And so if I'm doing an interview or anything else, it's always going to be against a natural wall. So I'm not going to have any kind of screen. And what I will say with this one, because I have kind of like the wall of fame, I get people that comment, like somebody will be on the show and they'll bring it up. Oh, is that Chet Canfield? And so it kind of helps as well. But the big takeaway is I don't use any kind of screens unless I'm at a hotel where it looks ugly in the background. And it could be a gorgeous Marriott, but it still looks like a hotel. And so for me, it's when I'm on the road, I might use it, but any other time, I use natural. So I like natural for various reasons. One of the ones you just said, quality wise, I like the idea of if it's for an interview and it's there forever. I like the idea of not having, as you said, the glowing hands and everything. The challenge you're going to run into always is it also depends on the guest. So the guests, if they're not at home, they might want to have, they might not feel they can have their regular background on. So you can only control your side. But I think since you can control your side, and if you're in the environment, I would always just use a regular background. And I know Kelly always, I mean, it's good branding on Kelly's behalf because she has her books behind her that she publishes. But you can tell it's her real background, and Kelly could grab one of those books, like that. But I mean, so for her, I think it makes sense. So I think make it on brand so it makes sense. But at the same time, yeah, I'm not a huge fan of, if I can help it, having the hands where it's like you can see their hand go through the screen and that. But also at the same time, I get that if somebody's on the road, like there's been people that have done interviews in their car that I know that have told me later I did it in my car and I wouldn't have known because they used a good backdrop. So I think if you have to, I'd rather have that than a horrible background. But if you can have a decent background, I'd always rather have it than the screen. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, because I get a lot of mixed reviews on it for sure.
Yeah, and
And
I mean, Heidi.
yes,
So Heidi always has the same background everywhere she goes, and it looks like a home. Like it looks like it's at home. But she uses it because she's always at hotels and on the road and everywhere. So she uses the same consistent one all the time. But I can't even think of once I've ever seen her hand go into it or anything. So I don't know if she always has good lighting or it just worked out well or she picked the right background. But hers, I've never seen her go into it. But again, I talk to some people and it's like their head's half through it, and they'll show a book and it's like half through it. So yeah, hopefully
yeah,
that helped.
it's tough. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cool. My pleasure. So I see another one here. Where's it at? Does the As Seen on banner help you get chosen to be a guest on podcasts? My answer is best way I could say it is it can't hurt. But the reason I think it does help is because it shows people that you've already been on other shows. You have experience, that people have bought you on their show. So if you have a full banner, they're like, oh, they've done quite a few interviews. So I think that was Katana. I think she might be gone now, but I mean, but the short answer is yes. I think it certainly helps. People trust that they can, trust that you'll be a good guest on their show. Um, I know we've pretty much gone to the 15 extra minutes. I think we covered everything for questions. Oh, somebody asked the radio guest list, but somebody else put it there. I think we're done for questions. The one golden rule for using email signature. When you say the one golden rule, I just want to make sure that I'm understanding that question. So is that like when you mean the actual golden rule? Like to make it about others or? Okay. Awesome. Yeah. Very cool. So I like that idea using the golden rule. So make it about other people on the signature. One thing I will say though as well is I also believe in being kind of the contrarian in things. And so agree with you full stop as far as the email signature, but I also talk about in this book actually the platinum rule. And it's funny because I thought I created it. And then I read years after I thought I created it that somebody else has a platinum rule and it was almost the same platinum rule. I'm like, what are the odds of that? But the platinum rule I felt was so an email signature, I think you're 100% right. But the platinum rule, I believe, just to leave you guys with something else, is when you're networking with people, when you're talking to people, when you're building that relationship bank, what I believe the platinum rule is, first of all, the golden rule is do unto others as you would have them do unto you. I think the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So what's the difference? What I mean is personalize it for them. So when you think of personality types, if I'm a fast talker, high energy, and you're not, and you're the customer, you're slow paced, what have you. If I was practicing the golden rule, I would try to be high energy because I want you to, that's what I figured you want because that's who I am. But if I personalize it to them, it's going, no, they would maybe rather if I slowed down and I was less chaotic and what have you. So to me, that's the platinum rule is do unto others as they would have you do unto them. So golden rule on email signature, but I do believe when we're building relationships, we should practice the platinum rule, which is trying to figure out what they would want and make it about them, not what you would want done onto you. Does that make sense? So, okay, cool. All right. I think, like I say, we went enough over time that I should let you guys go. Hopefully it was valuable again. Thank you for the Q&A because that was really valuable, I think, to help others. To be continued. We're going to do another one of these next month. I don't have the date in front of me, but watch my email. That's the easiest way. We'll send another note out. I'll send a note actually out in the next few days about the upcoming next 3 of these we're going to do. And feel free to join us for those. Again, meant to be completely free. Hopefully it's valuable and to be continued. And everybody, by the way, because this is the last one for the year, happy holidays. Hope you guys have an amazing holiday season. Get all the gifts if that's what you want, all the gifts you want. If not that, all the positive energy you want. Until next time, to be continued. Thank you, everybody.